Hello, John Terrell here. We're diving into part 2 of my Adventures in the Forgotten Realms review for MTG Cube. I'll be talking about cards suitable for my lower power environment in this installment. Welcome to Cultic Cube, where we cube religiously. We make you better at Cube and make your cube better. In part 1 of my AFR review, we talked about the cards that are and are not going into Aleasis, my higher powered environment. You may recall that there are only 4 cards from the set that could break into that cube. There's a broader swath of cards, though, that are going into this lower powered environment. So a word about the environment first. The cube that I'll be discussing today is called Petty Nobility. It's a 450 card Masters power level cube. It's highly synergistic, a Jenny and Johnny sort of environment. It is slower than my Vintage Unpowered environment. We give players time to set up their sweet engines and go off. There are no planeswalkers at all here. We don't have a ton of stone cold bombs. The idea is that the individual card doesn't produce insane amounts of value, but that cards working in conjunction with each other do. Archetypes supported include Blink, Aristocrats, +1/+1 counters, life gain matters, tokens and go wide, and spells matter. This project is sponsored by Cardamajigs. They have launched a Kickstarter for Series 2 of their awesome Cubamajig reusable booster packs for Cube Draft. I'll chat more about that awesome product later in the video. So card number 1 is Cleric Class. This is an uncommon for a single white mana pip. It's an enchantment with the new subtype Class. So these new class enchantments are a cool new spin on the level up cards that you will doubtless remember from Rise of the Eldrazi, such as Student of Warfare, Enclave Cryptologist, Jiraga Treespeaker. So like with the level up cards, you can spend mana to level up these cards, and you can only level the classes at sorcery speed. Alright, so let's look at Cleric Class. So when you cast it for a single white pip, it hits the field at level 1, which says if you would gain life, you gain that much life +1 instead. Level 2 costs 3 and a white. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And then finally level 3 costs 4 and a white. When this class becomes level 3, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You gain life equal to its toughness. Now, the classes retain all of their previous abilities as they level up. So that means that in fact, you'll gain life equal to its toughness +1, and you'll get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control when level 3 goes off. For me, I kind of like it. I don't think that the card is amazing, but I like that in my environment it's promoting not only the Life Matters deck, but also the +1/+1 counters deck. And those two very often bridge in this environment. An initial question if you're contemplating adding this card is simply whether level 1 is useful to you. The format has cards that do this sort of thing already, notably Angel of Vitality, I suppose, which is a 3-mana creature that has this text on it. It's a 2/2 flyer, so it's great that that's on a body. I think that this text is kind of fine. Granted, this card doesn't do anything by itself, but this particular format is slow enough that there's not just a wealth of things to do on turn 1. You probably won't be punished too hard by spending your first turn playing an engine piece that doesn't affect the board in any way. You're just not going to get run over that quickly, and you're setting yourself up to gain extra life anyway, right? So the aggro deck is going to have a harder time pressuring you, provided you do find ways of gaining life. In green, we have been running for a long time Hardened Scales. That's a single green mana for an enchantment that says if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. So you get to add an additional +1/+1 counter. So here's a card with a pretty similar effect and a pretty similar mana cost. Hardened Scales is a good card in the counters deck. So I think this is a fine addition to the life gain deck. Now, of course, it does other things as well. 4 is rather a steep cost to attain level 2 here, but I do like that its effect happens whenever you gain life. So once we hit level 2, whenever you gain life, you get to put a counter on something, right? A +1/+1 counter on something. Again, this is a familiar effect. We've got cards like Cradle of Vitality in the cube. It's a 4-mana enchantment that says whenever you gain life, you may pay 1 and a white, and if you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature for each 1 life you've gained. Cleric class is quietly a kind of exciting card for this particular format. If you don't care at all about life gain, then, I hope you fast forwarded through the past few minutes of discussion. All right, let's move on. Priest of Ancient Lore. This is a common. It's a creature, dwarf cleric, for 2 and a white. It's a 2/1. When Priest of Ancient Lore enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life and you draw a card. So we can compare this dwarf to Thraben Inspector, of course. Thraben Inspector costs a single white for a 1/2, and it investigates. So you get the whole Priest of Ancient Lore package for the same cost, for 3 total mana. You get a similar sized body, but you get to do it on an installment plan with Thraben Inspector. Priest of Ancient Lore gains you an additional life, which may not be super relevant, but there is this life gain deck, of course, so that is nice. Cloud Conceer is another card to which we might compare Priest of Ancient Lore. That card from M20 is 2 and a blue for a 2/1 flyer, and when Cloud Conceer enters the battlefield, draw a card. I think Cloud Conceer is really quite excellent. 3 mana, replaces itself, you get a 2/1 evasive creature. Priest of Ancient Lore is substantially worse than Cloud Conceer for not having evasion. But there's a blink deck as well, so it's nice that you get these 2 effects on ETB. So this is a fine little package, all said. On balance, Thraben Inspector is a much better card for being a 1 mana play. It's extraordinarily important. Thraben Inspector is a third of the cost of Priest of Ancient Lore. You can still do the blink stuff with Thraben Inspector. I think this guy is not an insane card by any means, but I'm kind of excited that white gets a tool that just replaces itself on ETB like this, which is a powerful thing, even if nobody's getting terribly excited about a 2/1 for 3 mana. Next up, we've got Teleportation Circle. This is a rare enchantment, costs 3 and a white. At the beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 target artifact or creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So here we've got kind of a slick upgrade to Conjurer's Closet, which is a 5 mana artifact that's got really quite similar text, although you can't blink artifacts with it. I love that we get this card. It's still hard to find a density of good, repeatable blink effects to put in one's deck, let alone to put in one's cube. You may recall from my Modern Horizons 2 review that one slight sadness I had was that we didn't get more blink support in MH2, but as we said, it's hard to complain because MH1 did have a bunch of toys for us, so that's cool. Anyway, I'm happy that we get a little toy here. I'm just going to get rid of Crystal Shard now. That card has been my pitiful blink enabler that I always try to comfort myself by saying the Crystal Shard can do other stuff and really annoy the opponent by bouncing their stuff. It doesn't work out the way you want it to. I mean, it's a nuisance more than anything else. Crystal Shard here, I guess I'll read it. You probably know the card. It's from Mirrodin. It's 3 generic mana for an artifact. You can spend 3 generic mana and tap this artifact, or you can spend a single blue and tap this artifact, and then you return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1 generic mana. So you can return your own stuff to hand this way and then replay it. You got to spend the mana to replay it though, right? So you're not like really blinking stuff. You're just bouncing your own stuff and replaying it and taking this tempo hit in order to accrue some other kind of advantage. You can also use this more aggressively against your opponent's creatures. They have to hold up a mana, right, to prevent you from bouncing their thing. A nuisance, but really largely a nuisance, because where the aggressive Crystal Shard is good is in a deck that's trying to apply pressure. And why are you putting a 3 mana do nothing artifact in your, in your aggressive deck? Anyway, we're cutting it from this environment now. Teleportation Circle it is. Okay, on to blue. You find the villain's lair. This is a common. It's 1 blue for an instant. Choose 1. Counter target spell, or draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. We have the inevitable cancel variant of the set. In this environment, I like having a few cancels. This is a designedly slower environment. I don't want the counter magic to be super efficient. I don't want it to be trivially easy to break up opponents' combo-y stuff they're trying to assemble. So I do have some 3 mana counters in here already. Dissipate, Scatter to the Winds, Supreme Will, Sage's Dowsing. You Find the Villain's Lair is a card that looks quite similar in some senses to Neutralize, which was the cancel variant from Ikoria, that has cycling 2. So this has the card replacement mode just as Neutralize does, but whereas Neutralize literally replaces itself for 2 generic mana, You Find the Villain's Lair has the same casting cost, but then it lets you draw 2, discard 2. Draw 2, discard 2 is more powerful on average than draw 1 is. It's circumstance dependent, of course, but it's more expensive to do the draw 2, discard 2 thing. I like the spin on this effect, and I really like these counter spells. Like Neutralize, I think, is wonderful for having the cycling mode. I run it in Aleasis, by the by, where I don't run many 3-mana counters at all. Apart from that, it's like Supreme Will, which also replaces itself, right? Or it's got that mode whereby it can replace itself. So You Find the Villain's Lair. This is a nice addition to that growing stable of counter magic that can cycle. There are potentially other upsides too, of course. Discarding 2 could be extremely useful for strategies that care about the graveyard. Okay, that was the only blue card. Let's move on to black. Check for Traps. This is an uncommon for 1 and a black. It's a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. Exile that card. If an instant or a card with flash is exiled this way, they lose 1 life. Otherwise, you lose 1 life. I don't have a ton to say about this card. I think it's just good. It looks extremely similar to Agonizing Remorse from Theros Beyond Death. Agonizing Remorse has some additional upside. Agonizing Remorse is probably on balance the better card. I like having this effect at 2 mana, and I'm happy to have a couple of versions of this. In Petty Nobility, I don't want Inquisition of Kozilek or Duress or certainly Thoughtseize, but the 2-mana version is just a step slower and is still excellent and quite useful. Next black card is Deadly Dispute. It's a common for 1 and a black. It's an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw 2 cards, and create a treasure token. This card is a more expensive version of cards already in the cube, like Village Rites, which cost just black for an instant, and you sack a creature and draw 2 cards. Deadly Dispute is a new spin on Altar's Reap, which you may remember from Innistrad. It does about the same thing, although it doesn't create a treasure, and you can't sacrifice artifacts to it. I'm not running Altar's Reap in the cube. I'm running an upgraded version, Village Rites, which costs a single black mana pip to do Altar's Reap. Deadly Dispute is worse than Village Rites, but quite similar, especially since it repays you with a treasure token. So I don't know. I don't think this card is super amazing, but I kind of like that it exists. And, I'm in it for sack outlets, although one-shot self-sacrifice is not the greatest thing in the world. All right, next we've got Feign Death. It's a common, a single black mana pip for an instant that says, until end of turn, target creature gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So this card is, of course, a modest upgrade to Undying Evil from Dark Ascension, which is an instant for a single black mana that gives target creature Undying until end of turn. And Undying, you'll recall, says when it dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. The reason that this is better, well, this is better and worse, I guess. Let's start with why it's worse. The reason it's worse is Feign Death has the creature return to the battlefield tapped. The reason it's better, however, is that it doesn't care if the creature had +1/+1 counters on it already. In this format, there's a +1/+1 counters deck. So counters, they're just running rampant. You can be picking up counters pretty easily without even totally embracing the strategy. Undying Evil wasn't in the cube to begin with. It's not like I'm super excited that this is an upgrade to that card, but I think it's kind of a cool way of regenerating a creature unexpectedly, and it adds a counter, so that's a nice thing. You could care about that. Cultic Cube is supported by you. Check out my Patreon page that has all sorts of cool perks for supporters, as well as resources for everyone to freely access. I have affiliate relationships with TCG Player, Inked Gaming, and Amazon. If you're gearing up to make your AFR purchases, and you're considering doing so through TCG Player, follow my affiliate link in the video description. Make your purchases as usual. Your purchase won't cost you a dime more than it would otherwise, but you'll be helping to support this channel. Thank you for your support. Onward to red. Battlecry Goblin. This is an uncommon for 1 and a red. Creature, goblin. Kind of wish it had more on the type line there. I wish it were a goblin warrior, for instance. But that's fine. It's a goblin. It doesn't have a job. It just goblins. This is a grizzly bear. It's a 2/2 for 2. It has an activated ability and a triggered ability, however. So activated ability. You can pay 1 and a red. Goblins you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. And then the triggered ability, it says, whenever Battlecry Goblin attacks, if you attacked with creatures with a total power 6 or greater this combat, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. So this goblin is doing a wonky and expensive Rabblemaster impression. That's okay that it's wonky and expensive for me, because Rabblemaster does not belong in this format. The whole series of Rabblemaster cards are really quite premium, aggressive red 3-drops. And they're great for Elaesis, but I'm definitely not sticking them in Petty Nobility. This guy, though, is a grizzly bear that then does additional stuff. So I kind of like the whole package here. It's not an insane card. I think it's tuned well for the environment that I want to put the goblin in. It unlocks this goblin tribal that doesn't have to be a thing. There's no goblin tribal in the format, but there's some number of goblins running around, and they're running around in red, as you might expect. There are also goblin tokens, right, that can be created in various ways. So that's fine. So this thing could be a little goblin lord incidentally, without doing a whole bunch of work. It's nice that this card is sort of a modal card in as much as it can be cast as a grizzly bear for 2. However, if you don't have anything else to be doing with your mana, you can cast this thing for 4, and then it's a 3/2 haste. I mean, a 3/2 haste for 4 isn't an insane card, but if you've got nothing better to do, then, a 3/2 haste for 4 is better than a 2/2 for 2 and not spending the rest of that mana. This is sort of wonky fire breathing. You can pay for this activated ability as many times as you'd like, so you can pump power multiple times. That's nice. And then it does create a little token and help you go wide. A couple of little notes about this thing that may not be obvious on first reading it, at least they weren't necessarily to me. The triggered ability says, whenever this thing attacks, if you attacked with creatures with a total power of 6 or greater this combat, then you create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. So I'm rereading that because what I want to point out is that if you have to use the goblin's activated ability to get the team up to 6 power, then it's going to create this 1/1 red goblin that doesn't get the +1/+0 because you've already given your goblins the +1/+0. So the goblin that you create is just going to be a 1/1 that's tapped and attacking. If you've got mana to spare, though, you can do the fire breathing effect after you've created the 1/1. Or if you've already got your 6 power, then you can wait to do the pumping until after you've created the thing. All right, anyway, that's a fun little devil. You find some prisoners. This is an uncommon for 1 and a red. It's an instant. It's a modal spell. Choose 1. Destroy target artifact, or exile the top 3 cards of target opponent's library. Choose one of them. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. Wow, that's kind of cool. So this is an instant. It's a shatter. In Petty Nobility, I'm rather light on artifacts, so the shatter effect has less value, and something that just shatters generally isn't that exciting in the format. The second ability is cool, though. You get to spin the wheel, you get to look at the opponent's top 3 cards, and you get to play one of them. It is play, so you could play a land off the top if that's what makes sense to you. But also, it's super sweet that you get this Gonti Lord of Luxury-like thing. You don't have to be on color in order to cast the card. That's nice. Also, it's sort of amazing that you get until the end of your next turn in order to cast this thing. So you don't have to wait until you've got what you hope is enough excess mana to take advantage of whatever you flip off the opponent's library. So this is a sweet little cantrip for red. This is a card that replaces itself, but it replaces itself with your opponent's cards. That's going to be super annoying to be on the receiving end of this, just like Gonti is a super annoying thing. I don't know, at least I get super annoyed when I'm on the receiving end, but it's kind of fun to be doing it. And it's giving red a way of increasing the quality of its cards, giving red some card selection, and in this modal package, so you can also blow up a birthing pod or something. That's cool. Next we have You See a Pair of Goblins. This is an uncommon for 2 and a red. It's an instant. It's a modal spell. So option A, creatures you control get +2/+0 until the end of turn. Option B, create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. I'm excited about this card too. It doesn't look like much, maybe, I don't know, and it's a bunch of familiar effects that we've bundled together in one choose your own adventure package. But this is great. So Trumpet Blast is an effect that is super useful in go wide strategies. But Trumpet Blast can be like the worst top deck in the world, of course, right? When you've got nothing in play or your attacks just aren't advantageous even with a Trumpet Blast. So it's pretty neat that you don't have to Trumpet Blast with this card. It's got this other mode that's a Raise the Alarm mode. Now, it's more expensive than Raise the Alarm. You're paying a tariff for this flexibility. Raise the Alarm, of course, is 1 and a white for an instant that says create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Here we're paying 3 for the same thing. This is on par with Midnight Haunting, which is an instant for 2 and a white that creates 2 flying spirit tokens that are 1/1s. Now, so creating 2 1/1 red goblins, much worse than creating 2 1/1 flyers. We're paying a little too much for the effect. But the point, at least for me, is we have a card here that is a Trumpet Blast in its primary mode. I keep saying Trumpet Blast, but I'm not, but as if you know what I'm talking about, and probably many of you do, but in case you don't, Trumpet Blast, 2 and a red for an instant that says attacking creatures get +2/+0 until end of turn. So the same card, effectively, right, for the same price. But when Trumpet Blast is bad, you create a couple of bodies. You expand your board. You help to build a board state in which a Trumpet Blast might in fact be good. Anyway, I really like this card. I think that this is a brilliant melding of options on a modal card. Very cool. Okay, green cards. First one is Ochre Jelly. It's X and a green. Oh, this is a rare. For a creature ooze, it's a 0/0. It has trample. Ochre Jelly enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. And when Ochre Jelly dies, if it had 2 or more +1/+1 counters on it, create a token that's a copy of it at the beginning of the next end step. The token enters the battlefield with half that many +1/+1 counters on it, rounded down. So this card is kind of fine, I think. The rate could be better. I'd prefer if it were closer to Endless One, because you do have to pay the green mana in addition to the X. But there's a lot of value to be had in a creature that replaces itself. Anyway, and in this environment, we care about +1/+1 counters, so we can grow this thing. It has trample. That's great. On these cards that we can make into these enormous monsters when we've got mana to burn, that's cool and all, but unless they've got some kind of evasion, they can be not super duper good. Next, we've got Prosperous Innkeeper. It's an uncommon, 1 and a green for a creature halfling citizen. It's a 1/1. When Prosperous Innkeeper enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Cool, so we've got a Soul Sister in green joining forces with Essence Warden, which I don't actually run in the environment. Maybe I should think about running it in the environment. I like having some few enablers for life gain nonsense in green, because green does have some payoffs. Like, notably, recently we got Trudge Garden from Commander 21. Trudge Garden is 2 and a green for an enchantment that says whenever you gain life, you may pay 2 generic mana. If you do, create a 4/4 green fungus beast creature token with trample. Wow, that's pretty big. You have to pay 2, but if you can pay 2, you get a 4/4. So Prosperous Innkeeper and Trudge Garden, what a team, right? Something triggers Prosperous Innkeeper. You pay an additional 2 mana, you create a beast. Beast triggers Prosperous Innkeeper, you gain another life, and then that triggers Trudge Garden again, and you can pay another 2, so you can keep doing that as long as you got mana to keep pumping out beasts. And Prosperous Innkeeper pays you the token. That's kind of nice. I mean, I don't have much to do with that token necessarily, but it's cool that it does that. And then if you're in it to blink things, I hope you've got better things to blink than Prosperous Innkeeper, but if you don't, hey, you can blink this thing. This is kind of a neat little package of stuff. I like this little halfling citizen. Those are some fun new words on Magic cards, right? Halfling's definitely new. I think Citizen is too as well, right? Isn't this a new subtype? Okay, we've got one final card, and that is a class. We started with a class, we're ending with a class. This is a rare Ranger class. It's 1 and a green for an enchantment class. So, level 1, when Ranger class enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. So level 2 costs 1 and a green to level it up. Whenever you attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. Level 3 costs 3 and a green. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library. Okay, that's sweet. So this is a nice package, and this is the most efficiently costed of all of the classes, I believe. At level 1, you actually do affect the board. It's not the most insane thing in the world, but you get a grizzly bear, right? You get a 2/2 for 2. So that's kind of okay, you know? I mean, it's a modest baseline, but it's kind of okay as a baseline, I think. When you level it up, it only costs 1 and a green to level it, so that's good. Because Cleric class, you'll recall from at the beginning of our discussion, costs 3 and a white to get it up to level 2. So here you only have to pay another 2, and then you get this cool sort of anthem that lets you put a counter on an attacking creature. So notice it doesn't put counters on all of your attacking creatures, right? You just pick one attacking creature, you put a counter on it. That's okay though, I think, especially when we care about counters. So we're sort of building up to a Curse of Predation. Curse of Predation, I'll read that to you. This was from a commander set. It's 2 and a green for an enchantment, Aura Curse. Enchant player. Whenever a creature attacks enchanted player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This is kind of a sweet anthem type effect in green for a deck that wants to turn things sideways. Curse of Predation is, I think, too strong a card for Petty Nobility. I've run it in other environments at other points in time. It's kind of a feast or famine card, but when it works, boy, it works, and it's extraordinarily powerful. So with Ranger class, we're building our own version of that on an installment plan. It's a much weaker version though, because we're only putting 1 counter on a creature. Not like everybody automatically gets a counter. So it's more fair, but still powerful, I think. And then we only need another 4 to get to our ultimate here. And, I don't know, that's cool. I don't know if this is correct or not, but for me, I've been sort of evaluating these classes, ignoring their final level, just as we often ignore the ultimate on Planeswalkers when we're doing a kind of basic evaluation of them. That may not be correct though, because Ranger class is 2 and 2 and 4 to cast and follow the upgrade path, and 4 is not crazy, right? So you may well get there. And when you do get there, you're generating card advantage in a way that green likes. This project is sponsored by Cardamajigs. They're coming out with Series 2 of their Cubamajig reusable booster packs. They have a Kickstarter that's up now and will run through mid-August. The fine people at Cardamajigs have re-engineered the new booster packs to make them even stronger and less prone to bulging than they might have been in the past. They come pre-assembled in boxes of 10, and the boxes themselves are totally gorgeous. Cardamajigs kindly sent me samples the other day. I was so excited to get these Cubamajigs that are packaged inside these beautiful collector's boxes. They reflect the artwork on the Cubamajigs they're in. They're also releasing cube boxes that they call Podamajigs that can hold several hundred double-sleeved cards, and these too are printed with that fantastic new art. Go to cubeks.com to find the Kickstarter or follow the link in the video description. So there we have it, the 13 cards I'm sticking in Petty Nobility from AFR. I'm excited. I think we got some cool tools here. What's my favorite tool? I think Ranger class is super sweet. So I'm excited to play more with that card. And then you see a pair of goblins, which is the Trumpet Blast / Dragon Fodder spell. I'm kind of unreasonably fond of the flexibility of that card. What are you most excited about from this set? And let me know what I missed and what else I should be looking at. Let's keep hanging out and chatting Cube.